United States, New York City, when a young boy saves the life of the woman who has mistreated him. It forces both of them to confront their prejudices in a life-changing moment of unexpected courage. Malik Johnson, a 7-year-old black boy, has faced constant racism from his teacher, Mrs. Thompson, throughout the school year. Every day, he enters the classroom not knowing what new humiliation he will face. Whether it's being called out in front of his peers or having his work dismissed despite his excellent grades, Malik has grown used to the unfair treatment. Mrs. Thompson, a middle-aged white woman, seems determined to make Malik feel small, constantly reminding him of his place in the world. She often calls him lazy and incapable, even though Malik's test scores and assignments reflect the opposite. The disparity between his grades and her treatment of him only deepens Malik's confusion and hurt. He feels trapped, forced to endure the daily onslaught of insults, unable to escape from the environment that is supposed to be a place of learning and growth. Despite this, Malik has learned to cope with the constant verbal abuse. He keeps his head down and focuses on his studies, choosing to ignore the cruel words, telling himself that one day he would be able to leave this place behind. He knows that his education is his way out of the circumstances that have defined his life up until now. He dreams of a better future, one where he is not defined by his race, where he is judged for his abilities and character, not his skin color. But with each passing day, his dream feels further out of reach. He begins to doubt whether the world will ever change enough for him to succeed. But everything changes on a regular day in class, when Mrs. Thompson suddenly collapses, clutching her chest and gasping for air. The students are in a panic, unsure of what to do. Malik, who has been taught CPR by his older sibling, doesn't hesitate. He rushes to her side, knowing that he's the only one who can help in this moment of crisis. The class falls silent as Malik, despite his fears, begins performing chest compressions and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Time seems to stretch on as Malik works, his hands shaking with the intensity of the moment. His heart races, but his focus remains clear. Save her life. As he continues to work, a small part of him wonders if anyone else will step forward, but he knows they are too scared, too unprepared. Malik is determined to do what he's been taught, to do what is right. What would you do if the person who hurt you most needed your help in a life-or-death situation? Malik watches in horror as Mrs. Thompson collapses onto the floor, her face turning pale, her body trembling in distress. The classroom, usually filled with chatter and noise, falls silent, and the only sound is the frantic calls for help. Panic ripples through the students, but no one steps forward to act. Malik's heart races as he watches the woman who has tormented him for so long now, in desperate need of help. Despite the years of abuse, despite the cruelty he's endured from her, he is the only one who rises to the occasion. The years of being ignored, belittled, and dismissed all seem to fade away in this critical moment. His mind clears, and instinct takes over. Malik, still shaking, runs to her side, kneeling down quickly. His mind races as he recalls the CPR techniques his older sibling had taught him. He remembers the way they instructed him to keep calm, to focus, to save a life, no matter the circumstances. His hands tremble as they hover over her chest, but his determination pushes him forward. He's learned how to block out fear before. He's had to do it many times, but this time it's different. This is real. This is a life on the line. "Please, Mrs. Thompson, stay with me," Malik says, his voice filled with urgency and fear for the woman who has tormented him. He starts chest compressions, trying to keep the rhythm steady, trying not to let his panic get the best of him. His hands press down hard, but they shake uncontrollably. His eyes flicker to the other students, who are frozen in disbelief, their faces a mix of fear and confusion. Some of them whisper in disbelief, but no one steps forward. No one else acts. All eyes are on Malik, waiting for him to save the person who has made his life so difficult. As Malik works, the seconds feel like hours. His mind tries to stay focused, but the flood of emotions is hard to ignore. He's saving the life of someone who has belittled him, someone who has made him feel worthless. Yet, in this moment, none of that matters. He's doing what he's been taught. He's helping someone who is in danger, someone who needs him. And that is all that matters right now. "Come on, Mrs. Thompson," Malik mutters to himself, his voice tight with both desperation and determination. The class watches in stunned silence, the tension in the room unbearable. Every eye is on Malik, waiting to see what will happen next. Stop. He's pushing himself beyond his limits, trying to save her, trying to prove to himself that he can be more than what everyone has told him he is. Mrs. Thompson's breathing slows, but Malik doesn't stop, applying more pressure, working faster now. He refuses to give up. He refuses to let her die, no matter how much anger he's carried in his heart toward her. The seconds stretch on forever, and Malik's arms ache with exhaustion, but he knows he can't stop until she's okay. After what feels like an eternity, Mrs. Thompson takes a deep breath and begins to regain consciousness. Her chest rises and falls slowly, the color beginning to return to her face. Malik's heart pounds in his chest as he looks at her, his relief flooding his body. For a moment, everything stops. The room, the world outside. Malik can only focus on the woman he's just saved. Malik feels a sense of pride wash over him, but it's quickly replaced by confusion. He's saved someone who has tormented him for so long. What does this mean for him? How should he feel? He looks around at his classmates, who are still processing what just happened. How would you feel if you saved someone's life, even after all the harm they caused you? Mrs. Thompson is taken to the hospital, and the school administration commends Malik for his bravery, though many are still shocked by the incident. A few days later, Mrs. Thompson returns to class, her expression one of guilt and disbelief. She looks at Malik as he walks in, a sense of shame hanging over her. "Malik, I don't know what to say," she begins, her voice faltering. "You saved my life. After everything I've said to you, I don't know how to make it right." Malik stands there, unsure of what to say in return. His life has been full of hurt, but in this moment, he sees the woman who tormented him, now broken and vulnerable. "You don't have to make it right," Malik says quietly, his voice strong despite the years of mistreatment. "You just have to try." The room is filled with an uncomfortable silence as Mrs. Thompson absorbs Malik's words. She looks at him, tears welling in her eyes, realizing the weight of the harm she's caused. She spent so much of her life thinking she was right, but now she's confronted with a reality she hadn't considered. She's wrong, and Malik has shown her what true courage and compassion are. For the first time, Mrs. Thompson feels a deep shift within herself. She's always prided herself on being a teacher who imparts knowledge, but Malik has taught her a lesson she never expected to learn. It's one thing to talk about fairness and equality, but it's another to see someone live it in action, especially when that someone has every reason to hold a grudge. As Malik walks away, he feels the weight of the moment settle in. He didn't do it for praise. He didn't do it for recognition. He did it because it was the right thing to do. But in this instance, he can't ignore the shift that's happening between him and Mrs. Thompson. Maybe, just maybe, this is the beginning of something different. Maybe this is the start of change for both of them. As Mrs. Thompson watches Malik leave, she quietly vows to never forget this moment and the boy who showed her what true strength really is. She realizes that words have power, but actions speak louder. And in that moment, she sees the humanity in him, something she had failed to see before. She knows she must do better, not just for herself, but for every student she has yet to meet. Do you think people can change after doing something harmful? What would it take for that change to happen? A few weeks later, Mrs. Thompson surprises Malik by inviting him to her office after school. She has something important to share with him. Malik had no idea what to expect. It had been weeks since the life-changing moment when he had saved Mrs. Thompson's life. After all the chaos, the words of his classmates, and the flood of emotions, he never expected any sort of change. His actions had been driven by instinct and compassion, not the hope for reward or recognition. Yet here he was, about to meet with the teacher who had once tormented him. He had been feeling conflicted over how to navigate his feelings after the event. But what was happening now was something Malik never imagined. As Malik enters the office, he notices the change in Mrs. Thompson's demeanor. She doesn't look the same woman who had been so quick to judge him, so dismissive of his worth. The shame and guilt are evident in her face, and for the first time, Malik feels like he is seeing the woman for who she truly is, flawed, but seeking redemption. She gestures for him to sit across from her. Her hands tremble slightly as she folds a piece of paper in front of her, gathering her words. "Malik, I've been thinking about everything you did for me. I realize now how wrong I was, and I want to make it right," she says, her voice low but sincere. "I've spoken to the principal, and I want to make sure you receive a full scholarship to any school of your choice." Malik is taken aback. His heart skips a beat, but he quickly looks away, uncertain whether he's hearing her correctly. "You don't have to do that," he says, his voice filled with disbelief. The thought of receiving a scholarship, something he never imagined possible, is overwhelming. He's only ever dreamt of a life beyond his current struggles, but it feels like a distant fantasy. Why would someone like Mrs. Thompson, who had caused him so much pain, offer him such a gesture of kindness? Mrs. Thompson smiles softly, as though she can sense his confusion. "I want to give you the future you deserve, and I hope you'll allow me to be a part of it." Her words hit Malik deeply. Despite the scars from the past, her sincerity is undeniable. This isn't just about money or education. It's about a person trying to make amends for the hurt they've caused. In this quiet office, Malik finds a moment of understanding, a chance to heal the wounds inflicted on him, and perhaps, just perhaps, allow forgiveness to take root. Malik feels an unexpected weight lift from his chest. It's a mix of gratitude, disbelief, and hope. He had never expected to be seen in this way, not by Mrs. Thompson or anyone else in his life. It's difficult to fully grasp the enormity of the moment, but something shifts inside him. He nods quietly, unsure but grateful. "Thank you," he whispers, his voice stronger than it had been in days. The weight of his gratitude is unspoken, a silent acknowledgement that this small act of kindness is the first step toward healing a long history of hurt. For Mrs. Thompson, this moment is about more than just helping Malik. It's about her own redemption, a lesson she's learning the hard way. The pride she once held in her ability to teach is now replaced with the realization that the most important lessons are the ones learned outside of the classroom. She doesn't expect Malik to forget everything she's done, nor does she expect forgiveness immediately. But she is willing to try, and that, she realizes, is the beginning of real change for both of them. Would you accept help from someone who wronged you if it meant a better future for you? As Malik moves forward with his scholarship, he begins to notice the subtle changes in Mrs. Thompson's behavior. She treats him and his classmates with newfound respect, always encouraging their potential. The once rigid and cold atmosphere in the classroom slowly begins to warm as Mrs. Thompson works to make amends. She's no longer quick to judge, but instead takes the time to understand her students, giving them the support they need to thrive. Malik watches these changes unfold, and, for the first time in a long time, he feels seen, not as a stereotype, but as a person. Her respect and encouragement inspire Malik to do the same for others. The class atmosphere shifts as Mrs. Thompson works to make amends, showing kindness and warmth instead of prejudice. Malik begins to notice the difference in his own behavior, too. He's not just grateful for the scholarship anymore. He's grateful for the growth he sees in the woman who once hurt him. Malik starts to feel less like a victim and more like a person worthy of respect and dignity. For the first time, he understands that forgiveness doesn't just change the person being forgiven, it changes the person who forgives as well. Malik realizes that the burden of hatred and resentment he carried for so long only hurt him. By forgiving Mrs. Thompson, he's not only freeing her, but he's freeing himself, too. The heavy weight of bitterness and anger that he once carried begins to lift. He starts to see a future full of possibilities, opportunities he never thought possible before. His education is now secured, and his sense of purpose has been reignited. With his education secured and a new sense of purpose, Malik's life begins to transform. He is no longer the boy who was forgotten and mistreated. He is someone who has not only risen above his circumstances, but has found it within himself to rise above his pain. He knows he has the power to break the cycle of hatred and hurt that has affected him for so long. He has the ability to change his future and the futures of those around him. He begins to believe in the power of second chances, not just for others, but for himself. As time passes, Malik's story becomes a lesson for others about the power of forgiveness, the importance of seeing beyond skin color, and the transformative effects of kindness. He learns that healing can begin when someone takes the first step, even if that step is difficult and painful. He knows now that forgiveness isn't just an act of generosity toward others. It's a gift to yourself. Malik's life has been changed, but he knows that the true power of change comes from within. He's not only changed his own life, but he's shown Mrs. Thompson that there's always room for growth, and that people can evolve and make amends for their mistakes. The forgiveness they both gave each other has opened the door to a new beginning for both of them. How do you think forgiveness can impact both the person forgiving and the one being forgiven? Malik graduates with honors, a proud and accomplished young man. His journey from the streets to the classroom, from victim to victor, is a testament to his resilience and the power of second chances. He's worked hard, persevered, and overcome the challenges that life threw at him. As he stands at the podium, receiving his diploma, the weight of everything he has endured and accomplished is finally sinking in. It's not just the scholarship or the recognition. It's the knowledge that he has transformed his own life, and that is worth more than any award. He goes on to attend college, where he excels and continues to work toward his dreams of becoming a lawyer. He chooses this path not just for the success it promises, but because he wants to use his education to fight for those who can't fight for themselves. His life has been shaped by others' actions, but now he's determined to shape his own future and make sure that no one else has to suffer the way he did. In law school, he meets people from all walks of life, each with their own struggles, and he uses these experiences to fuel his drive to make the world a better place. Malik's education and determination become the foundation for a new chapter in his life. As the years pass, Mrs. Thompson, now an ally, watches Malik's success from a distance. She's proud of the young man he has become and reflects on the role she played in his life. Her change of heart made all the difference. But it's not just about the scholarship or the praise. What matters most is that Malik's actions and the forgiveness he chose to give led to a better future. Mrs. Thompson knows that she was wrong and that her journey of change was only possible because Malik was willing to give her that chance. His kindness, his courage, and his willingness to forgive have transformed them both. And for Mrs. Thompson, that is the most important lesson of all. Malik's story is one of forgiveness, redemption, and the power of second chances. It teaches us that when we embrace compassion and understanding, we can break the cycles of hate and hurt that have existed for far too long. By forgiving others, we don't just change them. We change ourselves, and we create a world where healing is possible. What do you think the world would be like if we all embraced forgiveness and change? Years later, Malik returns to his old school as a guest speaker, sharing his story with the next generation. As he steps onto the stage, he looks around the familiar classroom, remembering the days when he was just another student trying to survive. The walls that once felt like barriers now feel like a space of opportunity, and Malik is humbled by how far he has come. His heart swells with pride as he stands in front of a new group of young minds, eager to listen to the lessons he has learned along the way. "I never thought I'd be here today, standing before you talking about forgiveness and change," he says, his voice filled with emotion. His words resonate with the students, many of whom can relate to his struggles. Malik never imagined that his story would be one of inspiration, but as he looks out at the eager faces in the audience, he realizes that sharing his journey has the power to ignite change. The audience listens intently as Malik speaks about the power of compassion, resilience, and using one's voice to stand up for what's right. He talks about how forgiveness, though difficult, is a choice that can free both the person who forgives and the one who is forgiven. He shares his experience with Mrs. Thompson, the teacher who once mistreated him, and how, through his own act of courage, he was able to offer her the chance for redemption, and in doing so, redeem himself. Malik speaks passionately about the importance of using one's voice to stand up against injustice, no matter how hard it might be. He encourages the students to embrace their own power and to know that they, too, can create change in the world. He tells them that they are not defined by their circumstances, and that with compassion and resilience, they can break the cycles of prejudice and hurt that have been perpetuated in society for too long. As Malik leaves the stage, he feels a sense of fulfillment and purpose. He knows that his journey isn't just about overcoming one teacher's prejudice. It's about creating a ripple effect of change in a world that needs it more than ever. His story isn't just about his own personal growth, but about the lessons he has learned that can help others navigate their own struggles. As he walks off the stage, Malik reflects on the path that has brought him here. He is no longer the angry boy who carried the weight of his past on his shoulders. He has learned the power of forgiveness and the importance of standing up for what is right. And now, as he looks at the next generation of young people, he knows that the future is in their hands. Malik's heart is full, knowing that the story he has lived will continue to inspire others to choose compassion, to embrace change, and to believe in their own ability to create a better world. What's one lesson from Malik's story that you think the world needs to hear?